Valdez traffic?
Yeah, it's Valdez back. Should be on the radar there. We've fetched up on the ground north of Goose Island off Fly Reef. And evidently leaking some oil. And we're going to be here for a while.
It happened overnight. Pristine Alaska wilderness hit by a massive wave of destruction, leaving nothing but profound suffering and death in its wake. At about 11 million gallons, it was the largest oil spill in U.S. history. 1,300 miles of shoreline were oiled. The impact to wildlife was devastating. The livelihoods of the fishing fleets and a way of life in local villages that depend on harvests from the sea were destroyed. The cleanup was hindered due to lack of preparation and equipment. In the first few days, it was primarily local residents, unwilling to sit and do nothing, who went to work, scooping up oil in buckets and rescuing oiled animals. Crews hired by Exxon finally arrived to try to get the oil off the beaches. At its peak, the cleanup effort included approximately 10,000 workers and continued over the next 4 summers. In 1991, the U.S. District Court approved a civil settlement of $900 million, which Exxon agreed to pay to the United States and the state of Alaska in 10 annual installments. The funds were to reimburse state and federal governments for cleanup costs and to fund restoration efforts. The Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council was established to oversee this restoration. Consisting of 3 state and 3 federal trustees, the council is aided by a public advisory committee made up of representatives from spill-affected interest groups. A restoration plan was created, and by the mid-1990s, numerous projects were underway to restore the marine-related resources and services that were affected by the spill. Since then, hundreds of research, monitoring, and general restoration projects have been funded through the plan. Scientists began population studies on many species that were heavily impacted. Seabirds, including kittiwakes, pigeon guillemots, and sea ducks, all feed on small forage fish, clams, and mussels. As a result, they came in direct contact with the oil and suffered high mortalities. Marine mammals like the harbor seal, whose numbers were declining even before the spill, were studied because of the added impact the spill had on the seals and their habitat. They were tested for the effects of crude oil, measured and tagged, and their movements tracked with satellite transmitters. Killer whales were also impacted, the extent of which is still being studied. Some were seen surfacing in the massive oil slick created by the Exxon Valdez and are presumed lost as a result. Sea otters have been the subject of long-term study as they spend their lives in the near-shore areas most impacted by the spill. In monitoring their recovery, researchers also look at affected prey species, such as mussels and sea urchins, as part of their work. The civil settlement has made possible research, monitoring, and restoration efforts that have gone far beyond any scientific study ever undertaken following a disaster. This work, across many disciplines, has vastly increased our knowledge about Alaska's marine environment and about cold water ecosystems. Because of the discovery of delayed and long-term effects of the oil on injured resources, a new ecosystem approach to restoration and monitoring of natural resources was developed. This notable advance has helped move science towards the long-term study of ecosystems, as opposed to a focus on the mortalities of individual animals measured at the time of a spill. Studying how Alaska's marine ecosystems function has helped scientists to identify changes caused by factors other than the oil spill, These include a change in forage fish availability due to warmer sea temperatures. Even subtle changes can have dramatic effects on seabird and marine mammal populations. The restoration program also funded research into the genetics of sockeye salmon. This has enabled fishery managers to predict escapement in the Kenai and Russian rivers, ensuring robust fish populations and a healthy sport fishery. Projects like this one at Little Waterfall Creek near Kodiak were designed to improve salmon spawning habitat. Within 2 years, 59% of the salmon run were taking advantage of a newly created bypass to reach spawning grounds in the upper portions of the creek. Studies of killer whales revealed that transient and resident killer whales are distinct populations. The transient whales, which feed primarily on marine mammals, were found to possess high levels of man-made contaminants, such as PCBs and DDT, that may be contributing to poor reproductive rates and declining populations. Since the spill, associated research, restoration, and monitoring projects have resulted in nearly 1,000 peer-reviewed published articles. These findings will aid scientists and governments around the world in responding to oil spills and other marine disasters. At the time of the oil spill, there were already environmental pressures in the region from land development and logging. Many of these forested areas provide old-growth breeding habitat for birds and are home to sensitive salmon streams. As the restoration plan was developed, it was determined that one of the best ways to help the spill region recover was to ensure that habitat for injured species would be protected so that natural recovery could take place over time. Over $370 million have been spent for land acquisitions and conservation and timber easements. Many of these protected parcels are now part of Alaska's parks, forests, and refuges. So successful was the Habitat Protection Program that in 1999, the Trustee Council set aside $25 million to protect wildlife habitat well into the future. Today, visitors to Prince William Sound and the North Gulf Coast of Alaska experience spectacular scenery and abundant wildlife. Within just a few years, it appeared on the surface, like the oil was gone. But one of the most stunning discoveries were the indisputable markers that even after 20 years, Exxon Valdez Oil is still present in the ecosystem and still toxic, standing in the way of nature's ability to restore itself.
No doubt about it. It has a very characteristic smell, and if you rub around these sediments, that's crude oil on the glove there.
Of the 31 injured resources, species, and services damaged by the oil spill, only 10 are considered fully recovered after 20 years. Among these is the bald eagle. About 250 eagles died from eating oiled seabirds and mammals in the days and weeks following the spill, but they were fairly quick to rebound after the threat from surface oil was gone. About 30,000 carcasses of common murres were picked up in the first 4 months following the oil spill. Today, the murre population has been declared recovered, with populations returning to pre-spill numbers. Sea otters, whose oiled carcasses became a global symbol for the 1989 Alaska oil spill, have recovered in much of Prince William Sound, although the process remains slow in some areas where oiling was heaviest. Sea otters and other wildlife, including harlequin ducks, forage for food in these intertidal areas. As they disturb the sediments, the oil becomes biologically available to the wildlife. Human use of intertidal resources also has not recovered. Local residents who use the beaches for subsistence foods remain concerned about safety, while others have been forced to give up harvesting what the sea provides, a practice that has been a cornerstone of their culture for thousands of years. While salmon fishing has recovered, the commercial herring fishery, worth millions of dollars to local communities, has not returned. Herring permits held by fishermen, once the family nest egg, are now virtually worthless. While the herring crash coincided with the spill, there are other factors, such as disease, that may be hindering their recovery. Today, oil is still shipped along the same route, but many new safeguards have been put into place, such as ship escort tugs, better response equipment, and double-hulled tankers mandated by the Oil Pollution Act of 1990. The act also provided for the establishment of public advisory groups. Prince William Sound and Cook Inlet Regional Citizen Advisory Councils have played a crucial role in improving oil spill response capabilities. More importantly, they have been instrumental in oil spill prevention efforts. One thing the Exxon Valdez disaster has taught us is that once oil gets in the water and washes up on beaches, it is very difficult to clean up, and it will likely persist there for decades. In spite of lingering effects from the oil spill, Prince William Sound is once again a spectacular jewel in America's remaining wild places. Hopefully, there will never be another oil spill in Alaska. But sadly, oil spills continue to happen. In recent years, even the 1989 Exxon Valdez oil spill has fallen off the list of the top 50 largest oil spills in the world. Governments, corporations, and we, as ordinary citizens, must remain diligent in our efforts to protect our oceans and sensitive shorelines. We cannot afford to become complacent, because disasters can and do happen overnight, just like on March 24th, 1989.